In this multidimensional world, much of which is invisible to the eye, a group of non-physical entities have come here to expand our knowledge of how the universe works. These non-physical teachers are called Joshua, and they convey their teaching through Gary Temple Bodley. Each week, Gary, with a selection of law of attraction experts, open up a roundtable of thought-provoking discussions surrounding the teachings of Joshua. Joshua's intention is to bring clarity to the listeners through the ever-expanding law of attraction by looking at reality from a new perspective. Welcome to the teachings of Joshua Roundtable.
Hello everyone, this is episode 7 of the Teachings of Joshua Roundtable. I'm your host, Gary Temple Bodley. Each week on this show, we talk about universal laws, the law of attraction, and the mechanism of physical reality. But since the Paris attacks last week, Joshua has been getting a lot of questions. Most of the questions are about the victims and how they were involved. If they were innocent bystanders, wouldn't the law of attraction keep them safe? How did they rendezvous with something they surely did not want? Was it bad timing, bad luck, or just something random? We're going to talk about this major manifestation event and see if we can look at it from a higher perspective. The show will be controversial, and there are a few people who will want to see the good that might come from this event. But when you understand the purpose of the event, you might just feel a bit better about this and other events like it. We are going through a time of great change and awakening. There are a lot of things going on all at the same time. It seems chaotic, but when you understand what's really happening, you'll begin to feel safer. The question of the week comes from Samantha, my agent. She lives in Spain and she is surrounded by Europeans who want revenge and are full of hatred right now. Joshua's answer to her question is really thought-provoking. On the roundtable today, we have Steve Finizza. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Gary.
And a new addition to the roundtable, Michael Kutzen. Hi, Michael.
How are you doing, Gary? Hi, Steve.
Hey.
Great to have you here. Janine's away this week. Janine's in a weekend course called Gratitude Training, and when she returns next week, she'll tell us all about that. So I'm sort of interested to hear what gratitude training is all about, but it sounds like fun. Before we begin, though, I'd like to welcome Michael to the show and find out how you heard about Joshua and what led you to wanting to get more involved in talking about subjects like this.
Well, thanks, Gary. It's interesting. A few weeks ago, I hadn't heard of you or hadn't heard of Joshua. I was banging around downloading some podcasts to listen to on my way to the train station or to and from Grand Central. I live in New York City, so to and from Grand Central Station as I'm walking. And I downloaded some broadcasts on the Law of Attraction Network. There's a show on it that's run by someone named Jules.
Right.
And you were on it, Gary, and you were talking about Joshua, and you were talking about who Joshua is or what Joshua is. Maybe that's the more appropriate word for him,
right.
Or for them.
Right.
Boy, I've got to be careful with my articles here and my pronouns.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really interesting broadcast. And you said that you were starting your radio show, or you had just begun your radio show. And I found it, which is something about which in my case took a lot of intention because I'm not so great with technology.
Neither am I.
but I found it,
Great.
And I thought the broadcasts were great. And then I asked you, not you, but I asked Joshua a couple of questions, and that's how we got in touch.
Excellent. And what did you think of those answers you got?
They were terrific. They're thought-provoking. They're not always easy to deal with.
No, they're not. Mm-mm.
They're not something that the average person, and I certainly view myself as an average person, at least in certain of, although on the path they're trying to learn, and they're not easily digested answers, which probably means that they're really good answers.
Well, when you're in the middle of something and you're asking a question that's important to you, you are sometimes tuned more to the issue that you're dealing with than the solution. So Joshua was trying to change your perspective so that you can sort of wake up out of the problem and look at the solution. And for you, it wasn't that difficult. Sometimes, though, when people are dealing with health issues, it's very challenging for them. And so they need to read it, the answer over and over, and they'll get it. But really, it helps other people a lot more, because when it's not your problem, you can learn more about these answers because you're just seeing the solution and it makes sense and you go, aha. But when it's happening to you, it's a little bit more intense.
Right, or like the Paris attack that we're going to talk about today.
Right.
People feel emotion. It's a visceral reaction that people have.
Right.
Myself included.
Sure. And this is, for us who are, talking about certain aspects of reality and how this all works, we have a different perspective, which is going to be completely, on the leading edge of thought and radically different from what the normal person would, think right away. And so we'll talk about that. And, we were tempted not even to discuss this topic because the way we're going to look at it is going to be different than other people are going to look at it. But when we break it down based on Joshua's teachings, we'll see that there's something going on here that's for a good cause, and we're going to try and find out what that is. So before we start, Michael, you've got Joshua's quote of the week. For those of you listening, you can get the quote of the week and the question of the week emailed to you every Saturday morning just by going to the Joshua website at theteachingsofjoshua.com and just click on sign up for the newsletter, and then it comes to you every week. So you can see the pictures and the quotes that we're going to be talking about here every week. But while you have that up, Michael, would you go ahead and read that quote?
My pleasure, Gary. This is a feeling reality. The only thing that really matters is how you feel. You are meant to feel good. So start demanding and expecting to feel good. If you feel bad, turn the other cheek. Pivot to a new thought. And do whatever it takes to feel better. Move towards feeling good.
So, that's fine. I'm getting chills right now when you read that. But if you think about it, nothing else matters. All that you're really doing when you're existing in the moment is feeling. You're designed to feel good. And the reason that it's important to feel good is that how you feel is your vibration. And your vibration is sent out into the universe and responds with a reality that matches how you feel. So if you're feeling good, you're going to have a good feeling reality. Your life is going to feel good to you more often. It builds up this momentum. If you feel bad, you're going to get reasons to feel bad. Things in reality are going to match how you feel. It's all going to come back to you. It's a mirror to how you're feeling. That's why feeling is the only thing that really matters. But I never heard that said before. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense.
Oh, it sure does. It's even, before you take it to that, to the level of attracting, more of the positive feeling or more of the negative feeling. There's always the expression of how you look at things, whether you look at the glass half empty or the glass half full.
Perfect example.
But this takes it to a different level, and it says aside from just looking at something, as the positive or the negative, and choosing your perspective and choosing whether you're going to be a miserable person or whether you're going to be someone who enjoys their life. This says on top of everything else, the way you look at a particular incident or a particular situation can lead you to the things that you really want.
Exactly. And, when Joshua receives questions from people, we had one just this week where a lady was going through this chronic irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and she's, wants a cure for it. The cure for it is a radical change in your approach to life. So for her, she created a condition in her body by thinking thoughts of worry and unhappiness. And the symptoms that showed up in this IBS matched how she was feeling before. So there is no pill or treatment that can solve this until she solves, the way that she approaches her life. And most of it for her was fear. And if she could just stop worrying so much, and realize that she's safe and protected and taken care of, and well-being is her, main thing that's going on here, then she can then this condition is not needed, not necessary for her to experience anymore, and will go away. But when she looks at that problem as the reason she's not happy is because of the problem, then she's focusing on the problem, and the problem just gets worse and worse and worse. And she sort of gets stuck in a cycle of looking at something she doesn't like, and then that focus creates, an even more horrible feeling for her. So that's true of everything, and that's why feeling good is such a important part. But no one really understands that. You sort of think that you go through life feeling good sometimes and feeling bad sometimes. And it's okay to feel good and okay to feel bad. And no one ever teaches you that, no, it's not okay to feel bad. If you're feeling bad, it's a sign that you're thinking in a way that doesn't line up with what you really want or who you really are. And it's just going to make the reality something that you do not prefer rather than something you do prefer. And that's why focusing on feeling good and what you want moves you towards whatever it is you want.
Well, it's interesting. There's so much emphasis, when you read about what a psychologist will say, or mental health professionals will say, and they'll tell you have to deal with the bad things that that happened to you in the past. And I've got to tell you, I hear, sometimes family members talking about things that happened in the past, or something that, horrible that happened, and the more it seems to me, and I've gotten in trouble for saying this even long before discovering Joshua and discovering you. I've gotten in trouble for saying it. Saying, why are you dwelling on this? Stop wasting your time on this. Move on, live your life. And and maybe I don't say it so politically correctly, at least with family members, but I've got to tell you, we have a certain amount of physical, time in this physical plane, and spending it thinking about and crying about the bad things that happen just seems like a complete waste of time.
Do you agree with that, Steve?
Well, I would say that I think some people come here for the drama.
Oh, true.
So, it's obviously, look at what's on TV and what's on, what you can see at the movies. So,
or the news.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think what we can't do, we can't judge that as bad, because there is no bad. So it's like you come here to experience what you want to get out of it.
Right. But I think that if most people knew that focusing on what was not wanted or what you think is wrong, and that when you do that, it makes it bigger. If they just knew that, then they could learn to control their thoughts a little bit better and start speaking about what they do want.
Yeah,
but it's hard.
I would have liked to have known that a long time ago. And it kind of, if I had to pick something as wrong, and I know there is no wrong, it would be like, why isn't this more obvious to us? Why did I have to wait till I, was 40 years into my life before I, discovered this?
Yeah, it's interesting because how we work as humans, if you touch a hot stove, you immediately pull it away. You don't leave it on there. Like, our survival is based on feeling good. If it's raining, we go inside. If it's cold, we, light a fire. We're designed to move towards feeling better. But when we have negative emotions, we don't consider that the same thing as, being uncomfortable. But it is.
Yeah, and I think that there's a certain segment of the population where they feel like, well, we're here to toil,
right?
Sure. And then you get the reward at the end, and it's like
that's true.
It makes it like this is what we're supposed to be doing, and this is okay.
Right. No pain, no gain.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also based upon our religious beliefs.
Sure.
Yeah, we tend, that has been the way, at least, and I don't think that's necessarily what was intended by any of the major religions, but at least it as it has been interpreted, and it's like a game of telephone where you start with an original message, and then by the 15th iteration of it, it's not the original message, and it doesn't sound anything like the original message. And I think, at least in some traditions, that's the way it's eventually played itself out. Well, you're supposed to suffer, you'll get your reward later.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, you just think of the Bible as it went through 2,000 years of being transcribed, by certain leaders choosing, maybe they will add this aspect here so we can control the population, or, I mean, certainly Christianity has wanted to expand through getting converts. And so the more that you could, shape a text to encourage people to join up and then to fight for the survival of this religion, the better chance you are of having the religion survive and keeping people in control. But certainly there's no printing press, so how did they do it? They had to write it down by hand hundreds of times over and over, and just like you said, the game of telephone, that's a completely different document than what was intended in the beginning.
Well, and in my tradition, I'm Jewish, and our tradition is that the Torah was handed to Moses on Sinai. But the reality is that there is no archaeological evidence. The first Torah that was ever discovered was only discovered, as an entity, was discovered like 100 years BC. So, and in fact, before that, the tradition was that the individual books were circulated in jars and bottles, just like they were in the where the Essenes were found. So, these things went through many, many iterations, many changes, many hands.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's switch over to our topic today, which is the Paris attacks. I personally don't watch the news. I stopped watching the news a few years ago. But when I learned about it, I was playing poker in a poker tournament, and there were TV sets going on, and so people are looking at the TV and getting texts on their phones, and so it broke out pretty quickly throughout the whole room of 100 people or 150 people. But it was really interesting to see how people reacted. Everyone was instantly negative, so that is a baseline sort of reaction to something that people perceive as wrong, and they all wanted revenge. So immediately it was like, we got to get them back, or we got to stop the terrorists, we got to change the conditions. There was actually a guy from Paris on the table, and one of the other guys says, "Welcome to our war." I go, oh my God, this is our war, and now he's part of it, and we've been fighting this war alone, is sort of what he was saying the whole time. And now France has been dragged into it along with whoever else is being attacked at the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't watch the news either, Gary, so I found out the same way. I was walking by in the break room at work and saw it on TV. So, and I haven't actually followed up. I know little about it. And just deliberately, I even thought about maybe I should be researching it more for the program, and it just didn't feel good. So I said, I'm not going to.
Well, Michael, you asked a question about it, and you were specifically talking about that young woman from America who was studying in France.
That's right, because I did hear about it on the news. And they were showing it either on I think on the local news, because she was from the New York metropolitan area.
Mm.
And, and the question that I asked Joshua was, specifically about this woman. She was a, beautiful young woman, about 21, 22 years old. And she was sitting at she was studying design in France, which was her dream. And she was sitting in the bistro when they opened fire. And, and Joshua's answer was a fascinating one. It's still one that I'm struggling with and wrestling with. It's still not an easy answer. That in some way that there is nothing, that there is no good or bad about this, and death isn't an ending.
Right.
But it isn't easy. I'll tell you that.
Well, it's not easy because we've been trained to think about death as something to avoid at all costs, and that it's a horrible thing, and it's annihilation and end of existence. So one thing in your letter, Josh, was saying is that in this time of awakening right now, we are moving from a general state of fear to a general state of love. And as we evolve as humans, we move from fear to love. There's only two things, fear and love. So fear on the left, love on the right, and we're making this transition. And these events cause this movement to occur because it affects the mass consciousness of the planet. An interesting thing in this answer was that this event really, in numbers, is pretty small. 120 something people were killed. I think I had that number right. And compared to other times, there would have been more people. But now, because of the internet and 24-hour news, everyone on the planet knows about it, right? So it's a huge thing, but compared to the Holocaust, for instance, it's minor. And the Holocaust was also an event like this as well. So this event causes change.
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah. No, I was about to say, you're absolutely right about the internet being the big issue, the big thing that made it public, as well as the fact that it was France.
Mm-hmm.
Because France, we view, we in America at least, view as a country that is, aside from all the jokes that we sometimes make about the French, there's still an affinity to the French, that they have been part of American history from its very beginning. Right. And, people dream about going to Paris and right. going, and love French history and French culture. So there is that particular affinity to it that made it seem like it was probably, and maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but at least I think that the perception was that France is very, that attacking France like that, right. Is very much like attacking America, or attacking people like Americans. Whereas there was the attack just yesterday in Mali.
Exactly, you're right. Exactly, perfect point.
That doesn't get the same sort of reaction.
Yeah, if this was Angola, no one would even bat an eye because we perceive that things like this happen all the time there. But because it's France, we take notice.
That's right.
Also, we're talking about because of the victims too were young, primarily, and especially the one American was very young and beautiful, like you said, and very innocent. So how did she get there? And Joshua said, had it been a group of soldiers, this would be a completely different perspective on it. But because it's innocent, citizens, it seems like much more of an outrage.
That's right. Well, it was like the 9/11 attacks here in New York City.
Which you live in New York, right?
Yeah. I not only live in New York, I started my career into world trade, and I work to this day in the Empire State Building. So I'm acutely aware of 9/11.
So then, okay, so if we look at the event of 9/11, for me, it was like, oh my God, what have we done to cause such rage? And that was before Joshua, really. But I would never state that out loud to anyone at the time. But when you get punched in the face by a stranger, you sort of have to say, well, was this random or did I do something here? And and then if you look at what happened after 9/11, we invaded Iraq, and sort of stirred up a hornet's nest, it seems. I don't think if we made any progress. I just think things got worse.
Well, we started originally with Afghanistan. And then Iraq. Iraq was. They tried to tie it in with what happened with the terror with Al Qaeda, but it was never really a very strong connection. The ostensible grounds for going in were weapons of mass destruction.
Right. So then you go into a foreign country, you take it over, and then you have these atrocities that occurred in the prison there with the humiliation of the prisoners. At
Al Ghraib.
Yeah. And so that just fuels hatred against you even further as a people. And so then it's easy for them to recruit people who want to go and fight this jihad against who they perceive as evil.
Well, it also, there is also the theory that, Saddam Hussein, well, again, I guess speaking from my non-enlightened position, was not a particularly nice guy in terms of things he did. The question always was there worse? Yeah. And we're finding out
that there are. Yeah. So then to battle this fight more effectively, we get drones. And so now the drones are really this terror weapon there because, you can't see them. You can't defend yourself against them. You never know when it's going to happen. And it comes out that the drone attacks, 90% of the people who are killed are not the targets. So that fuels more people to want to fight. And then the only way that they can fight is to do terrorist attacks, which, might as well be called resistance fighters or whatever. So it's obvious by looking at what's been going on for years and years that fear and trying to eradicate an enemy is just not the solution. So what is a solution then? And if you were listening to what Josh was saying, that there's two choices that you could make, love or fear. You can't choose both. You can only choose one. We've been going down this path of fear, fearing terrorist attacks, fearing, what they could do, and fighting against it with a huge military machine. But is it effective? And we can see that it's not effective. And you can say the same thing about the drug wars too, fighting against what they were fearing, and putting a lot of energy into it, and the drug, culture has just blossomed like crazy. And now we're starting to see that marijuana is being accepted, and it was just this week, I think, that the minister in England for health said that had they done this, 100 years ago and legalized pot, they would have had alcohol on the category, 26 down the list with other, narcotics and drugs and stuff like that. He was actually fired for saying this, but it's, this fight against things just isn't working. And acting out of fear can never work, but acting out of love leverages the forces of the universe, and acting out of love is really the only practical solution.
So my question there is, how does Joshua say that, because this Paris attack created outrage, but right. How do they make the leap? How does the mass consciousness make the leap from outrage and anger to love? I don't see the direct, like the 9/11 event, we've had quite a few years, and have we seen that shift?
Well, like Michael was saying earlier when we were talking before the show, there was a lot of outpouring of love initially. And this is actually what Samantha's going to talk about when we get into that. But I think it's a longer term view. And as more of us get enlightened, we can look at subjects like this and we can see that fighting against them doesn't work. And so when more and more things happen like this, let's take another example, school shootings, for instance. So when you're facing a school shooting, there's really nothing you can do. How can you stop a school shooting from starting? And people sort of have to give up. So what they do is they started saying, well, it's easy to love children. Or if you have a, like Columbine, you hate the 2 kids that pulled it off or the 3 kids that pulled it off. But prior to that event, you love all children. And now after that event, you can say, well, let's see if we can come up with ways to support these kids so that they never get into the situation where they're left out of the system or they feel neglected or whatever. And some amazing things have happened in Colorado as a result of this. And so they're really proactive about it now. And the result of it is creating a school environment where millions of kids don't suffer silently. And now people are addressing bullying and a lot of other issues in schools that they had not addressed before. Well, it's a little bit different here because we sort of think that the Muslims are, in certain Muslims or radical Muslims, are our enemy from the get-go, right? But there's nothing we can do to change that. And we're going to realize that we can't change a certain group. If we were not fighting against them, the moderate Muslims would intervene and say that this is not acceptable. But even the moderate Muslims are saying that, well, we're sitting here under attack, or our brothers in other countries are under attack, and this radical behavior of a few of them is not so outrageous. But if they attacked, like Costa Rica, for instance, who has never had doesn't even have an army, then probably a lot more radical, moderate Muslims would take offense to that and say, listen, we got to do something about this. And that would probably start with, how do we frame our religion so that we can be a religion of love, which is what the Muslim religion in essence is, and all religions in essence are. And how can we, create an environment where we can discuss these things without having to, fight an enemy. And if there was no enemy, right, who would they be fighting? That's I think the point that we're supposed to see here, and that I think more and more people will see it as they start to realize that fighting against things don't work. That's my only thought. What do you guys think about that?
Well, yeah, I heard Steve's
Yeah.
These are all very, again, these are very tough things to deal with. It's probably the right perspective, but not an easy perspective. Because when you're in the heart of it, even remotely, you feel for it. For example, like I said, I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
And when I hear about a Palestinian attack or Gaza launching missiles at Israel, I go nuts.
Yeah.
That's my initial visceral reaction.
Sure.
How dare they?
Yeah.
Try to do that to in effect my people, whether I like them or not.
Right. And then how do you feel personally about them building communities on Palestinian lands?
I have issues with that.
Right. So you're moderate, and you can see that action out of a few extremists, we'll say, can be, a violation of some agreement or something here. And you can say, listen, you guys, you cannot do that. We're supposed to live peacefully. But when the Palestinians throw rockets at you, you're like, screw them. We're gonna annihilate them. And
frankly, in the last war, my initial reaction was go in, get the arms, go get anyone who's, and not, not the people, not all the people, and try to avoid civilian casualties.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, my thought was go in and knock out those tunnels and knock out those missiles.
Right.
And if some people have to die as a result, so be it.
Mm-hmm. But did it work?
No, unfortunately.
It can't work, right? That's the whole problem. That's the whole thing that people are going to come to realize that that's just not going to work. There's no way we can get all of them. And when you try to get all of them, you're going to have some collateral damage, and the collateral damage is going to fuel the anger of people, and the children are going to be raised with this anger, and they're going to grow up to be more terrorists. And so it's a cycle that you can't stop by fighting against. And that is the only point Joshua was trying to make here. Let's go ahead and read Samantha's question and see if we can get more insight straight from Joshua rather than from us trying to figure it out ourselves.
Perfect.
So, yeah. Steve, you want to go ahead and read that?
Sure thing. Dear Joshua, I have a question regarding Paris and the recent attacks. It's a tricky one to put into words, really. I have friends in Paris and former clients there, too. This small part of me, my ego, feels slightly guilty for not being more concerned about their welfare. But I think it's because I know on a deeper level they are perfectly safe. However, far from hearing all the uplifting stories I was hoping to hear, okay, there have been one or two, it's like the world has taken a nightmare pill, to quote Marianne Williamson. You want me to continue?
Well, yeah, no, that's good. So, really, after 9/11, there was just this outpouring of love and support for New York City that was unbelievable. And she's saying from, where she is, I mean, we've spent more time thinking about the firemen and the policemen who went in there to save everyone and how brave they were. And we heard tons of stories about that, and there were movies about it, and it was really an amazing thing. But she's saying that in France, There's not these stories of that right now. So let's go on to the next paragraph.
Okay. The mass fear has risen to a whole new level. People who are usually peaceful and rational are at war with each other, even on my Facebook feeds. Solution? Stay off social media? Even Pam Grout was attacked for daring to focus on love for Paris and its people in her recent blog. It's like the Muggles were taking a step forward before, but now they're trying to throw all of humanity back to the darkest ages of fear and taking several steps backwards. Their anger is turning sour and spiraling out of control, so they are hurting even their nearest and dearest in an attempt to make sense of it.
Okay, go to the next one.
This attack, while smaller than 9/11, but definitely not any less relevant to humanity, seems to have ignited a greater hatred than even the immediate aftermath of the Twin Towers. Or is this because the American mentality is far more focused on positivity and coming together as one? I had to walk away from and change the conversation numerous times this weekend, even with complete strangers. It's strange because I honestly didn't have Paris on my mind. I live far away from the city in a very tranquil place. Yet the fear seemed to have made its way to people here in our small town in much the same way as Paris. Will humanity ever move forward? We're so-called on the brink of seeing beneath the veil, on the brink of a new level of consciousness. Yet the weekend's activities seem to have plunged 99% of humanity further into doom and gloom mentality as well as a huge bitterness.
And I think her point there about 9/11 was that we were not afraid. We did stand together as one, as a country, I think. And so I think what she's feeling there is that everyone is in fear of an attack happening to them. And even though 9/11 was on a larger scale, it did seem that, we were united. Did it feel like that to you, Michael, being in New York?
Oh, there was no question. There was no such thing as a Democrat or a Republican at that point. We were all Americans. People were wearing the American flag lapel pins. Yep. There was a lot of fear, though. There was fear that was the first of what was going to be what were going to be many attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the news media was feeding it like crazy. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't, frankly, my wife and I couldn't watch the news reports anymore. I said, shut the television, or forget news. There was no television. Everything, every few minutes, they kept on showing the towers falling, and people running.
Right. Did you think that there was going to be another attack on New York in the days or weeks to follow?
There was a lot of fear about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Huge amount of fear.
You as a person, were you personally fearful?
I was not. And I'm not sure necessarily why I wasn't. I just felt like, an attack had happened. I happened not to have been in New York City that day. I happened to be at an educational a continuing legal education conference in New York, in White Plains that morning when it happened. And I just felt like, I go through Grand Central every day. I've been doing it for years. I travel throughout New York City, have been doing it for years. Why has this changed anything? Why should I feel any less safe today?
Yeah.
And in fact, there were a lot of, very heavily armed military people and SWAT teams and everything else. I said, if anything, I feel safer.
Yeah, true.
That was a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was interesting to me was that there was, I've been in World Trade Center a bunch of times, and just in the lobby, it seemed like there's more than 3,000 people. When those buildings are full, there's hundreds of thousands of people, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was early in the morning. Had the attack occurred about an hour later, the number of deaths would not have been in the thousands. It would have been in tens of thousands.
Sure. Yeah. So it was just that's an amazing aspect of it as well. And I have friends who tell stories of how, for whatever reason, they just weren't in. I have a really good friend that I play poker with, and he worked in that building, and he said it was just this weird thing that he didn't go in and work that day. He went in and work every day, and he was always there by 7 in the morning. He was a stockbroker. But for that one day, there was something happened that he wasn't there. And
Oh, we heard
that.
quite a yeah, we know quite a few stories like that. In fact, my wife's former boss was in that building. Yeah, when we knew it, I thought he was dead.
Yeah.
It turned out that his mother, he was driving into Manhattan. He was driving into his office. He got a call from his wife, and the message was, "Turn around, your mother just died."
Wow.
Ooh.
See? Okay, so let's read Joshua's answer because it's going to talk about that.
Well, actually, Samantha had a PS.
Well, yeah, don't worry about the PS. Let's just go through this one because that just goes into another topic.
Dear Samantha, you are right. The world has gone even more mad than before. Humanity is on the brink of a new level of consciousness. People are awakening to the fact that there is more going on than they can see. There are great changes coming. The world is moving from fear to love. The terrorist attacks, the school shootings, the police incidents, and all other such events you would call tragedy are the manifestation events that are beginning to change people's perception of reality.
All right, go to the next one real quick.
Before you move from fear to peace and love, you must become aligned vibrationally with the concept of acceptance. You cannot know something until you've reached vibrational alignment with it. You want peace, harmony, love, and security. If you, as a people, do not have that which you want, it is because you are not a vibrational match to it. In order to become a match, there is nothing you have to do other than allow the changes to be made to your vibration. The universe will present manifestation events that are designed to bring you to a new level of awareness and consciousness. These events will challenge your belief system. Because of your beliefs, you will judge the events as wrong or bad. But there is no wrong anywhere in the universe. This is a primary fact. It is the first phrase we wrote through Gary. If there is no such thing as wrong, then what makes it wrong is your belief system and your perspective, and they are at odds with what it is you really want. Alter your beliefs and perspective, and you will become changed. This change will raise your vibration so that it aligns with what is wanted.
Does that make sense to you guys?
It does. It's interesting. After, even after, kind of reliving some of the memories of 9/11, I felt some energy drained from me. And then as Steve was doing his very, his good reading of what Joshua just wrote. And by the way, you have a great, you could be the imitation of Joshua, Steve. You have a great reading voice. But as you were reading it, I felt uplifted.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, and that's what I love about this, is that it can take something and just, and this is a feeling universe of our physical reality, and if it makes you feel better, that's what it's all about.
I got chills when you read it.
Yeah. And I had read it before too, but when you read it out, in particular, when you just read it out loud, I really felt, I felt like this dark energy just lift.
And I think it's because we spent a few minutes talking about how we felt as humans, and then when Joshua speaks so clearly, we sort of come to align with what we really do want is peace, love, harmony, and security. And if we're not getting it, it's because we're not yet aligned with that. Okay, go on to the next paragraph.
And just I just want to add that this is Joshua's answer to most things that come up in life. It's all about this. The universe is vibrationally helping you change so that you can get what you want. So okay, I'll move on here.
Yeah.
When you ask for something, the universe answers and it is given. If you do not have that thing you want, it is because you are not yet a vibrational match to it. That's okay. The universe will help you become vibrationally ready by presenting you with challenges to your perspective and belief system. If you resist, you'll feel negative emotion. That bad feeling emotion is your indication that your perspective is not aligned with the version of you that will be ready for what you want. If you can alter your perspective, and as a result you feel better, then you have raised your vibration and you'll be ready for the next manifestation event that will help to shape your perspective and beliefs even further. In a short while, as long as you are not resisting, your vibration will be raised enough so that the thing you really want actually manifests into your reality. This is simply how the mechanism of physical reality functions.
That's all there is to it. You want something, you are not a match to it because your beliefs, primarily, are opposed to it. And the universe is going to place you into these situations that challenge your belief. And if you can stop and think about it and say, this belief that I have is not helping me, it's limiting me, I need to think about this from a different perspective, then that's when your beliefs are, your limited beliefs are reduced in intensity and your vibration changes as a result because you feel better.
And the first thing that pops up for me is that I don't feel good. And
right.
then that triggers, okay, why am I not feeling good? What is the belief that I feel has been violated by whatever I'm thinking about right now? Because that's the belief that's false. And that's what you have to work on minimizing or changing your perspective on.
So I think that the majority of people who saw the attacks in Paris felt fear that they could happen to them. And that is, so what do? You cancel your trip to Paris, or you hide out in your house, or whatever. And these are all things that limit you.
Well, you're doing what makes you feel better, in a way.
Well, you don't feel good. I mean, yeah. So choosing not to go to Paris, I don't know. Does that make you feel good?
Well, I think
or maybe a little less bad is probably, is that the way we want to live is the question.
Well, if you get angry at someone, it really makes you feel good to punch them, but it's not helping you.
Well, you're in a lower vibrational state.
Right.
And
so any decision you make from a lower vibrational state is going to be a low vibration action.
So that decision to not go to Paris is made from a fear-based stance.
Right.
But it does make you feel better, and you are going up that ladder of emotion, better emotions.
Yeah, but it doesn't help because it's the action that you took from that lower emotional state of being goes against what you really want. And if you had said, no, I'm going to Paris and I'm not going to be afraid, you would have a wonderful time in Paris. You'd show support. You'd see the outpouring of love. You'd be like one of the few Americans there. So the Parisian people would be like, thank you for coming and supporting us. You'd see all this love.
And if nothing else, you wouldn't have to make fewer reservations.
Yeah, exactly right.
but if you were pushing through it, like let's say you really were in a fear-based state and you were just going, I know I should do this, but you weren't truly ready for it, and you did have some overriding fears, that you would go to Paris and you would not have an ideal time because of the state you were in.
Yeah, right. But if you could pull yourself out of that low emotional state of being, realize that it is fear-based, and we went to South Africa right after 9/11, and we were literally the only Americans in South Africa because nobody was traveling outside of the country. And we went to I don't know, flying. I guess people weren't flying as much back then, but we had no issues. Everything was worked out perfectly. We went to Athens first and stayed there a few days on the way back to and back, and spent a whole 5 weeks with the family. It was really great. But literally there was not one other American we saw in the whole time we were there. It was incredible.
Yeah, and it probably was the ideal time to go.
It was unbelievable. What happened was the exchange rate went from 8 rand to $1 to 14 rand to $1, and we were millionaires. Everything was so cheap. Okay, so go on to the next one. Okay, go ahead. You as an individual.
Okay, thanks. You, as an individual, can become aligned with peace, love, and acceptance, whether your fellow man, neighbor, or even family members are aligned with you. It is always an individual thing. As you become personally aligned with love, and you are then perfectly aligned with the power of the universe, you will affect the mass consciousness of your society. One who is aligned with love is more powerful than millions who are aligned with fear. Your individual acceptance of the laws of the universe will not only be of great personal benefit to you, but your example will become a beacon to others. You cannot preach what you know. You can, however, be fearless in your resolve to love unconditionally.
Very good. Okay, go to the next one.
So we see you as aligned with love. We see that your perspective on this subject is in tune with who you really are. You understand that the manifestation event called the Paris attacks was created by those involved not to instill fear, but to bring about love. If this is your perspective, and you feel positive emotion when thinking about this event in this way, then you can be assured that you are aligned with love, not fear. But if you are thinking that the attacks are wrong, that the terrorists are bad, and that the victims were unlucky innocents, then you are aligned with fear, and you will feel negative emotion in the form of hatred and outrage. In an attempt to feel better, you will insist on revenge and retaliation. You will want to annihilate your perceived enemy. You will lash out at others who seek peace because you fear that those people will stand in the way of your revenge, and you believe that revenge is the only way you will ever feel better. But this is a false premise, and it will not work. It simply goes against the laws of the universe.
Okay.
So,
going to the next one there.
If you can see that these terrorist attacks, school shootings, and other such events are manifestation events designed to bring humanity what they really want, and you feel better as a result of looking at these subjects from the higher perspective, then you are personally on the right track. However, you must also see that everyone else who is operating in the old approach to life is simply reacting out of fear. They will make you wrong because it makes them feel better when others agree with their beliefs. Everyone is motivated to do whatever they can do to feel better. They are simply in a state of resistance. They feel powerless.
Right. So even if you personally can look at this event and events like it in a way that makes you feel better, you don't have to change how other people feel about it. And you can allow them to make you wrong if they want to, because they're just trying to make themselves feel better. You don't have to defend your position at all.
And you can see it is there's nothing wrong with how they're reacting or perceiving to it.
Right. It's all working out perfectly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Next one.
Okay. If you can see that these terrorist attacks,
Next paragraph.
Sorry. As the events continue to occur, people will begin to question their beliefs. When they stop seeing the terrorists as wrong and the school shooters as evil, they will awaken to a new approach to life. Some will find teachers, such as us, who will help them see a new perspective. Soon others will follow. You are one of the few pioneers. You are personally more advanced than most. This is your gift, yet it can feel lonely on the leading edge of thought. But as you continue to raise your vibration, as you accept the actions of the fearful masses that surround you, you can see them from the higher perspective as well. When you look at them and feel compassion rather than annoyance, you have altered your perspective and you have raised your vibration even higher. You are more loved than you can imagine. Everything is working out perfectly. You are doing very well indeed, and we are excited to see what comes next. Joshua.
Right. So the process of these events is to alter people's beliefs, and it may happen just a couple people at a time. And as people, maybe it's because people feel powerless, and then they seek out ways to feel better, and then they find Abraham or Joshua or anybody else, and then this leads them into a different approach to life or a different way of thinking, and maybe this solves the issue once and for all over the long term. Who knows? But
these are not easy things to digest. I heard Steve's
Yeah. It's funny because Janine too. We've been talking to Janine as well, and so she just so happened to have this, weekend course to do while we're talking about this very difficult topic, and she says, look how it worked out that I don't have to be on the show and talk about this because it confronted a lot of her beliefs as well, and certainly you out there listening to this right now, you're going to think this is all very tough to talk about, and but that's fine. There's a purpose for it all, and we'll all get there eventually.
I wanted to go back to last week. My son mentioned the comment about he didn't like being taken out of the movie. And I'm kind of looking at this Paris attack thing as I mean, if you want to look at it from the higher perspective, it was like a movie, and everybody played a role,
right.
and you could almost see it from let's say before they even came here. I mean, this might have been planned out prior to their incarnation in this physical reality, and they were like, they could be signing up, like, who wants to play the terrorist? Who wants to play the victim?
Right.
Okay, I'll do it. And then this all unfolded, and we come here to this physical reality without remembering all of our past lives. We know all this stuff, right? But we deliberately forget so that we can get into the role of the movie. So I'm able to feel better about other people because I want to reach out and just tell everybody, hey, nothing happened here.
Right.
It was all, but that's taking them out of the movie. And I think because we deliberately forget, there must be a reason. It must be to get involved in the movie. And maybe that's these reactions, they're visceral, right? You're feeling, and that's what, this is a feeling universe. And so I'm going to say it's good.
Interesting you say that because, I'm reading I'm reading Joshua's book, A Perception of Reality, and he talks about that people, that each soul, each spirit, if you may, is coming into this physical reality to try to experience certain things, and sometimes the experiences are what we, on this plane would say is not, is not a good experience, poverty, illness, whatever, but it's an experience to be had, and then afterwards the desires can change.
Yeah.
Right.
And
they're
all valuable.
They're all valid. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you guys, this was a really interesting show. And next week we will talk about some topic that is really fun and happy.
Overeating?
Yeah, overeating. That's
right by Thanksgiving.
That's right.
That's
true. We'll be full from Thanksgiving. Exactly.
Or screaming too much of it when the football team we're rooting for goes down in flames.
Exactly. Well, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I'm having issues with Dolphins right now. And you're a Giants fan. Are you a Giants fan or a Jets fan?
I'm more of a Jets fan, but I definitely like both teams. And,
and the Giants
seeing the Jets go down to the Bills on that Thursday night game was painful. Seeing the Giants almost squeak it out against the Patriots was hopeful, but still hurt a little bit. And I'm still smarting from the Mets.
Yeah, right. Well, so we're going to talk about fun stuff next week. Again, if you want to read this question yourself or any of the questions that Joshua gets, go to the website at theteachingsofjoshua.com. We thank you so much for listening to the show. We love having the show and talking about these things. Send your questions through to Joshua or to us through the website, and we'll see you all again next week. Have a happy week. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Teachings of Joshua Roundtable with Gary Temple Bodley. We will be back next week with another fun discussion. If you would like to ask Joshua a question or read more of Joshua's teachings, please visit us at theteachingsofjoshua.com. See you next week.